Hello all. Well, this is it, the final episode of Season 3 of the Orville. The episode's called Future Unknown. It feels very much like they've saved up most of the comedy for this episode because it's peppered throughout far more than any of the early episodes, which tended to take themselves way more seriously, which I enjoyed because it was very, very reminiscent of your classic Star Treks. There's a couple of stories running parallel in this one which is quite light and the other one which is your typical moral dilemma that this show does so well. It starts focusing on Isaac as he's walking around the ship with kind of jaunty 50s 60s sitcom music behind him. When he reaches the bridge, Bortus explains there's a ceremony that's going to take place, which is the renewal of mating vows between him and Clyden. The senior crew are invited, and he explains that it involves them running naked through a wood. He chases Clyden tries to escape him, and when he catches him, they consummate. We then get to watch the ceremony. Then right at the end, it becomes very awkward for the rest of the crew. They're obviously not watching the mating, I hasten to add. But when they come back, the crew are just all a little awkward, not quite sure not what to do, where to go. Except Isaac gets an idea. The secondary story relates to Sagas 4, which featured in the episode Majority Rule. And as a quick reminder of that one, it's the planet where societies run like Twitter, with people upvoting and downvoting. Except unlike Twitter, which is a bunch of random shouting out of windows, those opinions have real-world consequences and can result in a lobotomy. Lamar narrowly escaped that in the episode. It's democracy taken to the extreme, mob rule based on opinion and emotion rather than fact. Halsey tells them they've got to go back to the planet, and when they get near to it, they get a signal from Lysella, who was the girl who helped Lamar, asking them for help and to be picked up. And they're very confused, but it turns out she nicked one of their communicators. Meanwhile, Isaac, after looking up marriage on the computer, goes to the mess hall and proposes to Claire. What follows is quite a funny, awkward scene where Claire's frustrated with Isaac, and Isaac explains in his usual logical way, which doesn't really help Claire's mood. When Claire mentions the fact that her life is finite where his isn't, he says that he will look after her children and her children's descendants, and Claire's taken aback by that. There's a scene of a girl chat between Tala, Kelly and Claire where Claire's trying to figure it out, and they start doing a list of pros and cons right as Mercer walks in, and he does a quick 360 and starts walking out when he gets called back, and Kelly says, as the only sober person here, what's your opinion? And Mercer says, why don't you ask your kids? He then gets a round of applause for being the sensible, sober one. Going back to the secondary story, they pick up Lysella and she requests asylum, talking about her culture and how it's become worse and how people are searching to be outraged, are looking to be antagonistic towards each other. Clearly a commentary on cancel culture and the way social media pushes people to be the worst version of themselves. You know, no calm discourse, just attack and counterattack. She's told if she stays, she can never go back, which she agrees to, and Kelly is assigned to acclimatise her to her new way of life, and they leave the planet. Isaac goes to engineering, and there's a quick conversation about the possible marriage, because Claire still hasn't said yes. Lamar tells him that he's jumping the gun a bit, he hasn't been with any other women, and maybe he should check out the options and date other people. Meanwhile, Claire pulls the kids to one side to talk to them about it. They already know, and Marcus, who has grown up remarkably in this series, just tells her to go for it. She then finds Isaac in his little cubbyhole in engineering and says yes. Next scene, Isaac, following Lamar's advice, goes to Kelly's office and asks her for a date and sex, and utterly drops Lamar in it. The conversation awkwardly ends, and then Kelly goes to see Claire. Claire asks her to be maid of honour, and then Kelly tells her what happened. Claire rips into Isaac. There's then a great scene where she goes to engineering, screams out Lamar's name, and just rips him a new arsehole. It's a fantastic little scene. Kelly is showing Lysella around the ship, and she finds out about the life they live and the society which no longer needs money and is kind of utopian in a sense that you can do what you like as long as your life has value, and the value of that life is the currency now. And Kelly also shows her the simulator with a beautiful vista that once again shows the level of budget in this show this year. A couple of quick comedy scenes. Isaac asks Malloy to be best man, but Bortus muscles himself in. Gordon is really pissed about this. Doesn't say anything at the time, but said something later when he's asked if he was more annoyed by the Kaelon attacking or this. And I'm really annoyed by this. Then Isaac invites the Kaelon to the wedding. There's a confused conversation that follows because the Kaelon don't quite understand what he's doing, and he actually ends up inviting the entire race except for some guards that stay behind. And when they arrive in 4,000 ships, much to the shock and horror of the rest of the crew, and Claire points out to Isaac that they can't possibly cater for all of them, so it's agreed they will just transmit the wedding to the ships and only some will go. Another scene about Lysella, where she's overwhelmed and talks about how messed up her society is and how guilty she's feeling for escaping it. And she starts to realise that with all this technology, how much better her world could be. Kelly explains that it has to be earned, that the technology and the advancements come when societies are ready for them. This conversation continues in another scene where Kelly points out that if you did drop the technology in a society that wasn't prepared, those with power would take it, exploit it. They wouldn't share it. It would be disastrous. But clearly, Lysella's mind is made up because she asks to go back, because she feels selfish. Why should she have all this when her world is struggling? So they go back to the planet, and as her shuttle's about to leave, the alarm goes off. Tyler stops her, and she's got a communicator in a bag which has the schematics for various forms of technology. No weapons, but things like the replicator and simulator. So Kelly takes her to the simulator again and shows her this idyllic, beautiful world. Then fast forwards 5 years to a devastated wasteland. She explains that the early Union saw themselves as missionaries, if you like, people who would go through the universe to try and help societies develop, help them with technology, and shared it with them. And this is the result. As she said before, once the technology got in there, they all wanted it, they didn't want to share it, and they went to war and destroyed each other within 5 years. It's a hard lesson for Lysella to learn, but the penny finally drops, and she decides to stay on board the Orville. Back to the impending nuptials. Isaac's stag do is a disaster, as organised by Bortus, because Bortus basically is just doing an Elvis impersonation and singing to them. The hen do is a very different matter, a bit of a wild party, and Tyler has programmed a simulation of Isaac as a stripper cum dancer. The end of the episode is the wedding, and it takes place in a simulated wooden glade. They say their vows to each other, which are lovely, and Isaac's in his own logical way. There's a party afterwards where the Kaelon who came are mingling in a very awkward way. Then Alara arrives, like she did at the end of the second series, just randomly out of the blue. Was never sure why she left, because it seemed really odd, because she disappeared from the series and then you literally seemed to get a clone version. It felt like the same storylines were just being played out by somebody else. There were a load of rumours, but apparently it was because the direction of the show changed and they were starting to take it a bit more seriously, and her character didn't really fit within that narrative. So they basically had to let her go and moved in Tala, who is much more of a hard-assed character, much more confident, whereas Alara was less confident, though building her confidence. Bortus does his speech, and it's a disaster. It's an unmitigated disaster. Claire whispers to Isaac, and Isaac thanks Bortus and asks Malloy to say something, and Malloy kills it, obviously. And then he's asked to sing, because of course he's asked to sing. I don't know whether he's trying to push a different career. I seem to remember reading somewhere that that was what he was a singer and a mate of Seth MacFarlane's, and he just asked him to come along. But he does a lot of singing in this series. But it also made me think of the episode 6 where he was married himself, in the one where his relationship with the iPhone girl was wiped from existence. I don't imagine that was an intention, but it just felt quite poignant with him giving a speech. There's a small moment of humanity, shall we say, from Isaac when he puts his hand on Ty's shoulder. And Kelly takes Mercer's hand and they exchange a look. As I said in an earlier episode, when they had that weird Bortus-Kelly moment, it certainly feels far more like they've been pushing Kelly and Mercer together. Certainly more so. Whether it would develop into anything more than just a tight friendship, I don't know. But it's certainly how it feels. And that's where the episode ends, with Malloy singing. So again, another fantastic episode. Quite lightweight in some ways. And as I say, much more humour in this one. I did enjoy the secondary storyline because you've then got the moral complications within there of how societies have to develop and grow by themselves. The reflection of Lysella's world and how it seems to be regressing. I feel that about our world sometimes. How the interference would cause so many problems. And it's something the ship's experienced itself in the first series when Kelly helped a little girl and then became a god. You can completely understand her motivations as well. She wants to help her people. The guilt for leaving them behind. The chance of doing something. Only when faced with the reality of what that would mean does it finally sink in. It's just a nice, gentle little moral story. So in all, a nice ending to the series. Possibly a little underwhelming compared to some of the other episodes. And I also found it slightly strange that Charlie didn't get mentioned at all. I didn't want them labouring on the point. You know, it's not a soap opera, but I expected there to be some reference, even maybe at the wedding. Just maybe a photo or just something. Someone saying, I wish you could have been here. I mean, I can't tell how long it was since that happened, but it seemed a bit odd not to at least mention it or reference it in any way. But still, a really good end to a fantastic series. Absolutely loved this series from beginning to end. Some weaker episodes, but no duds whatsoever. And as I alluded to at the beginning, this series is way more Star Trek than current Star Trek. A series of a utopian society who deal with parallel dilemmas to the world today. Just everything I loved about TNG and the original series. I'll leave that there. I could probably go on waxing lyrical about my love for this series, but I will repeat myself constantly if I do that. So, quick plug for my comic, Marked, which is available from my website, and the link is in the description below. If you've enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe, and leave any comments. Thank you very much for listening, and peace out.